hi everyone. I think we'll get started in an effort to start on time here. Welcome to the library. I'm Cindy Palmer. I work here in the development office. And we're thrilled to have Cynthia again to share another of her adventures with us over, I don't know, what, 3 or 4 years now. We've traveled to many places with her, always an adventure and always with some wonderful images. So I think without further ado, we'll just get started, and maybe some other people will join us, but we'll get going. There is a group of little girls having a brownie activity in the other room, so we might get a little overflow noise, but we have lots of things going on here in the evening, so Cynthia can speak a little louder and we'll do the best we can. So thank you for coming.
Thank you,
Cynthia. Yep.
Actually, I'm not going to do that much speaking, hopefully, and more pictures than speaking, because I have 6 folders of pictures to show. See, they're excited about it. Oh, I don't even know. I mean, I can project, but wow, that's a bit of competition. Okay, so my French friend and I took a trip to South America and Central America, and we went down to Ecuador and to the Galapagos Islands. And so I'm going to show you pictures of Ecuador and then coming up to Central America to Guatemala and Belize. Okay, now Ecuador. Somebody told me about a couple of weeks before I left that the political situation was bad. There had been a coup d'etat down there, or an attempt against the president by the police. Now the president's a very young, handsome, leftist leader, and he had cut the police benefits, so they basically protested, and he went over to the police station, bared his chest, and said, "Kill me, kill me." And so the New York Times says, and they almost did. And so the army had to rescue him from the police. And so he had to reestablish his credibility after this and do some damage control. His name is President Correa, and I expected there to be an oppressive atmosphere there, one of fear, but it was quite the opposite. When we were staying in Old Quito, the colonial part of the city, and it was almost a carnival atmosphere there. It was quite amazing and a lot of fun. Basically, Correa had, he appeared on the balcony of the presidential palace with some very important leaders from Latin America, including Evo Morales of Bolivia, and the president of Chile, whose name escapes me. I'm not sure. But anyway, there were also many demonstrations and marches in favor of the president while we were there. Just the streets were full of people, full of peddlers, musicians, throngs, and soldiers. But it was anything, it felt anything but menacing. And so I'm going to show you the folder of Quito, with a music that I selected to make it seem festive. Now, as usual, I'm using the fusion approach, which means that it's not, I'm using actually Nicaraguan music because it's the only music I could find that actually had the feeling of what I wanted for the festive atmosphere. The many campesinos, or basically farmers, peasants as they say sometimes is the translation for campesino, came into the city in favor to do marches with banners in favor of Correa. So you're going to see some of these demonstrators, and you're going to see how beautiful the old colonial city is. It's the 2nd highest capital in the world, under a volcano. The streets are very steep, and you can get short of breath for the first couple of days. There are some very beautiful churches there. Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself here, excuse me. Disasters like volcanic eruptions are reflected in the art in some of the churches and in contemporary art. In fact, Ecuador has many, many volcanoes, and the north-south axis of Ecuador is called the Avenue of Volcanoes. And one of the most amazing things I saw in the street was that when the president was going to come out of the presidential palace, and there was lots of people waiting to see, and there were soldiers around, the soldiers had the ability to cross the line from the military to the personal, which an American soldier would never do. Can you imagine an American soldier waiting for the president to come out and starting to like joke with little kids? No, they wouldn't break their attention, their discipline, but these soldiers, they were joking with the kids, and I was just amazed by this. So one more note about the leftist politics. You're going to see a couple of pictures of the President Correa. And one of the, I'm going to translate for you in Spanish, the poster says to the people, you decide between the dark past and the beautiful revolution in democracy. To victory always. Well, to victory always in Spanish is hasta la victoria siempre, which was the slogan of Cuban revolutionist Che Guevara. So there's this really bizarre mix of talk about democracy along with these slogans that can be attributed to Cuban revolutionary. And I thought that was really interesting, how this was mixing and being sort of assimilated and sort of recycled. Also, the word revolution is very interesting down there. They use the word revolution sort of in the way we use the word reform. For example, I saw a big billboard on the highway for business development, which for a builder, and it said, the revolution is business development, which would hardly be the overthrow of the moneyed class. So it seemed very funny to me. In fact, the notion of revolution even sells t-shirts on the Galapagos Islands, with Charles Darwin being depicted as Che Guevara. Also, there was a lot of graffiti that I took pictures of, some of it pro-president, but others were espousing other sort of political movements that they thought should be followed in the country. And just a little quick lesson in Spanish. You know words in English like, for example, okay, revolution, no, I'm getting this wrong. Revolution, okay, shun in English, in Spanish is sion. Sion, everybody say sion. Okay, so how would you say revolution in Spanish? Revolution, right. Okay, now in the same thing, if we have words like ism, like nationalism. In Spanish, ism is ismo. How would you say nationalism in Spanish? Nacionalismo. Nacionalismo. Very good. You guys are great at Spanish. Okay, so now we're going to see the folder of Quito, a high city steeply sprawling across high mountains and deep ravines under an active volcano. folder. Okay, so in Quito, we're going to talk about the religious art. Quito is very famous for its colonial art, which is called the Quito School of Art. We were there 3 weeks before the Day of the Dead, All Souls Day, and they have a food tradition to make beverage and a kind of bread that's in the shape of a doll. It's called a wawa, the bread, which you will see. And also the beverage they make is a purplish red, which is made from purple corn. And someone has suggested that these represent the Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ. I don't know if that's true or not. Some of the things, it's unfortunate that, not unfortunate, unfortunate for me, that I could not photograph a lot of things in the museums. And even on the internet, I could find hardly any images of the Quito School of Art. It's an amazing school of art because of its depictions of suffering, which are the most intense I've ever seen in any religious art. The bloodiest Christs that I've ever seen in any religious art. And the explanation that I got from tour guides was that the Indians, the indigenous people, suffered so greatly at the hands of the Spaniards that after they were trained to paint, they depicted their suffering, they depicted the Christ as very agonized, as a reflection of their own suffering. And in addition, the Spaniards used the art to evangelize the Indians, and so that they would become Christians. And they thought that by making Christ look like he was suffering even more, it would be more convincing to the Indians to convert. So these are a couple of explanations. Also, that there is one really wonderful church called La Merced, which is the Virgin of Mercy, and I took a few pictures of paintings in there that the Virgin of Mercy was supposed to intercede in case of disasters like volcano eruptions, earthquakes, drought. And then when I went to a southern city of Cuenca, which is also a colonial city, I went to a cemetery on the Day of the Dead, and outside the cemetery gates and even inside the cemetery, they were selling the bread that are in the shapes of dolls and this purple corn drink, which they drink and eat on the Day of the Dead. And they go into the cemetery and clean the family crypts. And then the other last image you'll see is an image of the Virgin of Quito, which is a huge statue of the Virgin above the city, on a mountaintop above the city, as the protectress of the city, also known as the Virgin of the Apocalypse. And we are going to listen to some music to view these, which, excuse me for a minute, which I find to be very, very moving, and I wanted to share it with you. I hope that you like it. This music is by a Peruvian singer, and it's about the Black Christ. The song is about the Black Christ. Oops. What did I do wrong? Oop, I messed up. I don't know what I did wrong here. Okay. church wine made by nuns. Those are the Wawas. This isn't a restaurant. You can eat in restaurants and cafes with religious art on the walls. Religion is ubiquitous in Quito. Or at least old Quito. You see the wind is broken. It's the Virgin up in the sky, as you can see. Christ in prison. In case they try to run away from bondage, the bells would give them away. That's the Virgin of the Apocalypse, the statue above the city. And this is the Paseo del Niño at Christmas. They choose a child to represent Jesus, and then they parade him around town, I think on horseback or something. It's called El Paseo del Niño, the passing of the child. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see that. Okay, we're going to go on now to my favorite part of this, which is the Galapagos Islands. Where's my notes?
Oh, they're right. I think they're right behind you.
Oh. Okay, the Galapagos Islands, I never thought I would get there. It was just amazing that I did. And it was interesting, as I was saying, again, that word revolution, when you see a t-shirt of Charles Darwin dressed like Che Guevara, a very strange and interesting thing. It seems like everything has to be draped in revolution in order to be palatable to South Americans. This is my own theory, because apparently there were so many dictatorships that without, the revolutions wanted to overthrow the dictatorships, so that now anybody in power is a little bit maybe suspect of going back to dictatorship, and so using the word revolution sort of eases everybody's mind. We got a last-minute deal from an agency called Carpe Diem, which I think was a perfect name for an agency for someone on an impulsive journey. And I forgot to stress the fact that we were being very impulsive. In 8 weeks, we did not stay any place more than 3 nights. And most times we stayed somewhere only 2 nights or 1 night, except for the Galapagos cruise, which was 7 nights and 8 days on a catamaran sailboat called the Nemo 2. I highly recommend it, the Nemo 2, if anybody's interested. Only carries 12 tourists. We snorkeled twice a day. I don't have any underwater photographs, so you're not going to see the sharks, sea turtles, penguins, and sea lions that actually swam right under me, which was just incredible, the most incredible. I've had a lot of travel experiences in my life, but this was really just amazing. Anyway, we spent 1 night on land before we took the cruise, And we got a little preview of what was in store for us, because in this town, on this one island, the birds would not take flight when you approach them. They're so tame. And the sea lions would go to sleep in the fish market right at your feet. And they just were not afraid at all. And also we got a great chance to taste the Afro-Equatorian food, because there's Afro-Equatorians mostly living up in the, I guess, northwest corner of Ecuador. So we got on the boat, we met our young guide who was a naturalist, had degrees in biology and ecology, and our captain, and then we had our adventure in paradise. Now, Galapagos was called by Melville a heap of cinders, but despite all the lava, and some of it very cruel lava, because this one kind of lava, there's several kinds, one is so sharp and jagged that it's called lava. And the guide kept joking and said, when you step on it, you go So it's called lava, but I don't know the real reason why it's called that, but he made that joke several times. So anyway, it hosts a lot of tame life and unique species. We saw birds nesting and mating, among them Nazca and blue-footed boobies, frigate birds with their big red pouch that you're going to see, which they use for courtship to attract the females, and also the legendary albatross. We saw albatross babies that were just so cute and full of, they were shedding all this fluffy down, and quite ridiculous looking, but darling. And then there were beaches just covered with sea lions that were sleeping and nursing, and heaps of marine iguanas. The landscape was absolutely marvelous. We went to about 6 different islands, and we also went to a turtle breeding center where the land turtles are being bred because they were so depleted by pirates who took safe harbor there, and they put the live turtles in the holds of their ship to take on their long journeys for meat, for food. So now they are trying to bring some species back that are almost extinct, and one species, I don't know exactly which species, but it only has one member left, and that is called Lonesome George. And they've tried to get Lonesome George to breed with other, sort of related species, but nothing has ever come of it, So they think that his particular species will probably become extinct. But I just felt so sorry for this 100-year-old turtle being forced to mate with these other species. It just seemed kind of grotesque to me. So anyway, let's see, is that all? Yes, okay. But first I just want to show you, before I turn on the music, a few pictures. This is Darwin as Che Guevara, the evolution revolution. This was our great tour agency owner, Paul Pereño of Carpe Diem. He's a Canadian Equatorian living in Quito. This is the fish market. It was actually lobsters, where the sea lion just decided, you can see him down in the corner, he just decided to take a nap down there, and he was completely unperturbed by everybody milling around. And then we had that great food, lots of coconut, and we had lobster there. It was wonderful. As you can see, there is the original here. There's our boat. This is a tour guide. Morris is his name. And there's our captain. Now we're going to go on the cruise, and this music is some of my very favorite because it's called Adventures in Paradise, which was a TV show when I was a kid, and I think it's one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever. So, and if you hear it repeating and repeating, like it ends and it starts up again, in order to continue with the pictures, please don't mind that. Oops, sorry, I messed up. Look, you got to do the music first.
Cynthia, what was the temperature?
Like spring, not summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. urchin spines, along with coral. That's the albatross. And those are the big albatross, those are the adults. Sally Lightfoot crabs. Some of these species are unique to the Galapagos. Nazca boobies. That's a lava tunnel that is broken down. That's a blue-footed booby. And that's the ring of guano around it. If a chick falls outside the ring of guano, it can never come back in and it will die. Lava. That's a lava cactus. This is a frigate bird. That's the lava. Okay. So then after we left the Galapagos, we flew back to Quito. So we went from sea level up to about 8,000 feet in a short time. And then the very next day, we started down the Avenue of the Volcanoes, and the following day climbed to 15,000 feet to the volcano called Cotopaxi. The Avenue of the Volcanoes just has one volcano after another going from north to south. Now it was kind of a difficult experience to go from sea level to such a height. And I was like a wet dish rag. I brought up the rear. I wasn't the oldest one, but I was bringing up the rear. And I mean, very much behind everyone, where they just thought that I was dead down on the side of the mountain. I was practically snowblind, and sometimes I was lost in the mist because the mist kept shifting. And I thought, well, I can't believe I'm doing this. It was really tough. But the landscape there was beautiful. It was sort of rolling green hills, and we saw llama herds there. And you're also going to see some pictures of a crafts market in the northern part above Quito, which actually I just included in this, even though we did it before we went to Galapagos. It was an interesting market, but the most interesting market was one we went to after the volcano, after climbing the volcano, in a town called Saquicili, which was an animal market. And they were selling all kinds of animals there. It was basically a marvel of squealing piglets being separated from their mothers, and guinea pigs scrambling when a big hand reached in the cage and lifted them up by the scruff of their neck. Either way, they both ended up on plates. And then we took a side trip to a crater lake called Kilauea. We hiked down into the lake, but we took sure-footed, cliff-hanging mules back up out of the crater, which had us, we were so scared we were laughing hysterically, like a couple of witches. And these mules, even if they've got this whole, let's say that's the edge of the cliff, even they've got all this space to make a corner, they will go right to the edge of the cliff before they'll make a turn. And you're like, you're like this, and it's terrible. Okay. And then farther down the avenue of the volcanoes, we stopped in a town called Riobamba, underneath another volcano called Chimborazo, which is a hiker's dream. Many people go down there to scale these volcanoes. The big attraction there was the hat market, where I bought this hat, which fit me when I bought it, but now it's too small. Now, I cannot figure this out. Anyway, and then finally we got down to the southern city of Cuenca, which is also a UNESCO World Patrimony site, and they were having their Independence from Spain festival with street fairs and fireworks and the whole works. Now this town is the birthplace, or the place of origin of the Panama hat, and they still make them there. However, everybody thinks the Panama hat's from Panama because they were shipped through Panama, and they were called Panama hats for that reason. So now down the Avenue of the Volcanoes.
Farolitos en el cielo, poco a poco van naciendo. Farolitos en el cielo, poco a poco van naciendo. Como nace el sentimiento por las calles de mi pueblo. Como nace el sentimiento por las calles de mi pueblo. Corazón que canta, corazón que sueña, lleno de esperanza. En la noche buena ya se escucha la tambora, repicando la alegría. Ya se escucha la tambora, repicando de alegría. Mecida por las olas va la luz de travesía. mecida por las olas va la luna en travesía. Corazón que canta, corazón que sueña, lleno de esperanza y hombre en la noche buena. Van sonando los tambores, pregonando sus amores, corazones que se alegran, pues llegó la noche buena. Pescador, deja tus remos, guarda pronto tu atarraya. Pescador, deja tus remos, guarda pronto tu atarraya. Que te espera por adentro el abrazo de tu amada. Que te espera por adentro el abrazo de tu amada. Corazón que canta, corazón que sueña, lleno de esperanza. En la noche buena, es la noche del ensueño, al abrigo de la llama. Es la noche del ensueño, al abrigo de la llama. Es la llama del consuelo que se lleva aquí en el alma. Es la llama del consuelo que se lleva aquí en el alma. Corazón que canta, corazón que sueña, lleno de esperanza y hombre en la noche buena. Corazón que canta, corazón que sueña, lleno de esperanza en la noche buena. Y farolito, ¿a dónde vas? Abrazarme con el mar. Ay, farolito, búscame el amor que se me fue. Ay, farolito, ¿a dónde vas? Abrazarme con el mar. Ay, farolito, búscame el amor que se me fue. Farolito, ¿a dónde vas? Abrazarme con el mar. Ay, farolito, búscame el amor que se te fue. Farolito, ¿a dónde vas? Abrazarme con el mar. Farolito, búscame el amor que se te fue. Van sonando los tambores,
That's Cotopaxi.
pregonando sus amores.
What country?
In Ecuador, we're still in Ecuador.
Corazones que se alegran.
That's me getting ready to
Buena.
slog up the side. That's how it looked from the side of the mountain.
Corazones que se alegran. Ay, pues llegó la noche buena. Van sonando los tambores, pregonando sus amores. Hay corazones que se alegran. Pues llegó la noche buena.
This is the Crater Lake.
Ay, pregonando sus amores. Farolitos en el cielo, poco a poco van naciendo. Farolitos en el cielo, poco a poco van naciendo. Como nace el sentimiento por las calles de mi pueblo. Como nace el sentimiento por las calles de mi pueblo. Corazón que canta, corazón que sueña, lleno de esperanza. En la noche buena, ya se escucha la tambora, replicando la alegría. Ya se escucha la tambora, replicando de alegría. Mecida por las olas va la luna en travesía. Mecida por las olas va la luna en travesía. Corazón que canta, corazón que sueña, lleno de esperanza y hombre en la noche buena. Van sonando los tambores, pregonando sus amores.
then we left Ecuador and went to Guatemala. I forgot to show my maps before. I was going to show you the map of Ecuador. But anyway, I can show you this map just so everybody gets their geography. It's always nice to refresh one's geography. Anyway, so we basically went in the highlands right around here. And then we went north, and this whole area up here is pretty flat and jungly. It's called El Petén. And then after we went to the ancient Mayan city of Tikal, we crossed over into Belize, came back down, and came back into Guatemala. But we were only a week in Belize, and as the title of my presentation said, oh, there it is better. We did everything very impulsively, so we didn't really know how long we were going to stay any place. We just played it by ear. We didn't have any reservations or anything like that. And that's exactly what we wanted. So in the highlands, in Guatemala, the Maya people believed that the humans are made of corn. And everywhere around Antigua and Atitlan, Lake Atitlan in the highlands, were fields of dry corn stalks, the corn already harvested. And in all these corn stalks were interspersed yellow flowers like sunflowers, growing wildflowers. No one was rushing to cut the stalks down to stubble. They were just there for a long, long time, and it made the countryside it gave the countryside a beautiful sense of repose and almost a feeling of suspended animation. I really, really liked the feeling it gave me. We escaped pretty quickly from the cities where there's lots of foreigners because we wanted to be in the more remote areas, especially around the indigenous peoples. So we drove to a city called Chichicastenango, which is famous for its market. But it's also very interesting in terms of religion. There's a sort of religious syncretism there. Now, syncretism is defined as the reconciliation or fusion of differing systems of belief. Fusion, coming together of two different systems of belief. So at the steps of the Catholic Church in Chichicastenango, you would have Mayan shamans. Now, a shaman is like a priest, a nature priest. I don't want to say witch doctor, that's an old, really terrible term. But it's a nature priest, a shaman. And so they are on the steps of the church building fires, burning incense, burning sugar, and worshiping their own gods, while inside the church is a Christian ceremony going on. And so this is going on, can be going on simultaneously. Also in the cemetery in this city is very, very interesting because all the tombs are painted every color of the rainbow. And sometimes the Mayan priests do the ceremonies inside the cemetery as well. And it's very interesting to see people in the church will walk all the way from the door to the altar on their knees. And the shamans on the steps of the church would also walk back and forth on their knees as they performed their rituals. And then we went further north to a very remote town called Chahul. We went through, it's a small town, a remote town in the highlands where all the women weave on backstrap looms. And it's at the end of the road in the highlands. This area suffered the most during the Civil War, especially in the 1980s, when their parish priest, who had come from Spain, was murdered by the army because of his liberation theology. Liberation theology interprets the teachings of Christ in terms of liberation from unjust conditions, social, political, and economic conditions. We didn't take pictures here. We didn't feel right about taking pictures. We knew they didn't really want us to take pictures. I do have a picture of my friend in the traditional garb because they invited us into their houses to try on things and to sell us things right out of their houses. But somebody, and it was nice not taking pictures actually because it promoted more interaction. And somebody in the church showed us the altar where there's an eternal flame to the priest who was murdered. And we also stumbled into a Catholic charismatic church service which reminded me of Protestant evangelical type church service with lots of shouting and this sort of stuff. And I asked somebody later why Protestant evangelism is on the rise in Guatemala. And one of the explanations, which I found plausible, was that during the Civil War, it was dangerous to be Catholic. Because Catholics, just like the liberation theology, some of them were associated with Marxism and leftist political ideology. So that is a theory that I find really interesting, why Protestant evangelism is on the rise there. So these are the highlands of Guatemala. And then there's only one more folder after this. Let me see, where is it? That's a shaman with the fire outside the church. Again, that's the shaman with the censer, swinging the censer, burning sugar as an offering. Inside the same church, now wouldn't you want to be buried there? There's a poultry market. Traditional dress in the highlands. The women all do, but the men, it's rare. That's my friend. And I got this from the internet because we didn't take pictures there. That's the church where the priest who was murdered preached. And this is the priest. I got that from the internet, of course. And we went to a cattle ranch, I forgot to mention that, where I drank milk. It's fresh from the udder for the first time in my life. not from the udder, okay, so just one more folder. Okay, the last folder is basically going to be in the jungle and in Belize. So just to show you again, we came out of the highlands and now this whole area, these highlands are here and this is all the more or less flat jungle area. And you go through Flores and then the ancient Mayan ruins of our city of Tikal, which has only been partially excavated, is up here. And then we crossed over through San Ignacio. Now the thing about all this is the Mayan world. In Tikal, which is the city in the north, has these temples that are almost like skyscrapers. They're so tall, they tower above the jungle canopy. And Tikal was our last stop before we went into Belize. Both Belize and Guatemala are full of Mayan archaeological sites and caves. The Mayans believed in an underworld called Xibalba, which was accessed through a cave, through the mouth and the labyrinthine tunnels of cave systems. We went to some caves in Guatemala called the Candelaria Caves, which is a cave system that a river runs through. And some scholars believe that this river is the river that's mentioned in the Mayan holy book, which is called the Popol Vuh. We stayed in some jungle cabins, cabañas, and we actually swam in the river between the mouths of the two caves, listening to howler monkeys and bird song. It was extremely exotic, but we stayed there only 2 nights. And then we went on up to Tikal to see the Mayan skyscrapers. Now, the most amazing thing about these temples are the staircases. Their staircases are incredibly steep, incredibly high, incredibly slippery, and the stairs are so narrow you can't even fit your whole foot on them. Okay, now some people say maybe their feet were really little, or maybe they only went down the stairs sideways. But these stairs are so dangerous that now the park has built wooden stairs to parallel the original stairs so that the tourists can actually climb up to the very top and see the landscape in the city. And a supervisor during an excavation actually fell to his death on one of these staircases because he didn't follow his own rules, which was they had put chains on either side of the stairs. He was supposed to hold on to this. He was saying something to somebody, didn't hold on to it, fell down, and died. There's also going to be a few pictures of some pyramids from a Mayan city in Honduras. We did just enter Honduras very shortly to see the Mayan city of Copan. These are better preserved pyramids. However, they're much lower. They're nowhere near as high. You will notice how the temples are half excavated and how the jungle quickly reclaims the land with roots and vines wrapping around everything and bringing down the stones. When you see the HIV warning, you'll know that we crossed over into Belize because HIV and AIDS is very widespread there, and you'll see signs all over the place in Belize. We wanted to go spelunking or caving in a cave system just across the border into Belize. This cave is called Actun Munichil Tuknal, and we got really excited about it by talking to people because we were really into having adventure. And this particular cave, it's a cave system. It has no light, no windows as they call them. You have to wear a headlamp. You have to swim and climb slippery boulders for 2 hours in pitch black darkness except for your headlamp in order to get to an inner ceremonial chamber, dry chamber, where Mayans made human sacrifices to the gods of the underworld, and there are supposedly pottery shards and bones in there that are ancient, and it sounds grisly and ghoulish, but it is this particular town has all these tour agencies taking people to this cave. However, Fortunately or unfortunately, we were not able to go in the cave because it rained so hard that the river swelled and it became very dangerous, so we were not allowed to go in the cave. Then we went to Belize City, which is a very kind of rundown city with because it used to be called British Honduras. It was colonialized by the British. Has old colonial mansions, ramshackle houses, open sewers, and cruise ships. And the oldest Anglican church in Central America. We also went to some islands called, well, the Keys, because the second largest reef in the world is off the coast of Belize. We went to one key called Tobacco Key, which you could walk around the entire circumference. I don't know if you'd use that word for an island. You could walk all the way around the island in only 10 minutes. And yet it had modest tourist accommodation, and it was the most tranquil place. It was right on the reef. And the reef, with the waves crashing over the reef, made this white noise that just was constantly in your ears. And the night skies, of course, made the stars very, very clear. So it was the best night's sleep I've had in so long that I should have stayed there 2 weeks. But guess how long I stayed there?
One night.
One night, right. Okay. Stalactite. I think that's the rain god's chalk. Okay, he wasn't really in there. I'll explain that. So. Those scary staircases. No. Only partially excavated. They were running around all over the place there. This is in Honduras, Copan. That's what they think it may have looked like. conch. This guy's a conch fisherman. He dives for the conch. That's the reef. That's beyond the reef there. They were burning coconut shells and dry leaves from a little hurricane that had gone through. That's an open sewer in Belize City. Cruise ship.
Oh, way off there, way up.
That was the governor's house of British Honduras. The oldest Anglican church in Central America. That was the American embassy at one time in Belize City. And this is very interesting because even on the end of a deserted beach, you have a warning about AIDS. Use a condom. So this is the end of a deserted beach. And of course, even though the official language of Belize is English, they also have many, I think about 40% of the population are Spanish speaking. So I think that's a very strange slide to end with, but that's the last. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry, I always go over time. It just is inevitable because I just take too many pictures and then that's the way it is. So,
Beautiful pictures.
so thank you. If anybody has any quick questions, a couple of questions, yes.
Is Belize its own country, or is it owned by some other country?
Yes, it's its own country, but the very strange thing I found about Belize is that there's an awful lot of American retirees down there, and the Belizean government seems very willing to sell its land to foreigners, to the point where, I was kind of marveling at the fact that does any of the land belong to the Belizeans? It just started wondering.
What were you going to tell us about the alligator?
Oh, the alligator. Oh, that was a trick. See, the thing is, when I got into ordering these pictures, and I took hours ordering these, I wanted a specific order to make an impression, or a whole.
Sure.
So, I just thought it'd be cool to show the cave and then show the alligator, like whatever it is, the alligator. But the thing is, actually, he was in a tank in a small town in Guatemala, in the same area, but in not a small town, more like a small city. He was in a tank, sort of like in the middle of the city park. And so I took a picture of him, but he just looked good after the previous picture. And so, I wanted you to think that, I was like the female version of Crocodile Dundee or something. Any other?
The church where they were selling the flowers, or had all the flowers outside where the shamans were, and would you purchase flowers like to bring to the altar?
Yes.
Kind of to make an offering, make merit?
Yes.
There was the fire and the candles were sort of all around that whole thing too.
I think that it was primarily to take into the church.
Yeah.
Because the shamans weren't using the flowers.
Yeah.
They were just using the sugar and the incense and the fire. Yeah. Yes?
In Galapagos, are there any settled towns and cities?
Yes, there are. We stayed overnight in Puerto Ayora. I'm sorry I didn't show you a map. I got all these maps and forgot to show them. But anyway, I couldn't remember because I lost my notebook and I lost all my notes, so I don't even know which islands I went to now because I lost my notes. But yes, there are some of the islands have towns, large towns, a couple of large towns.
But most of you stayed on like a catamaran or...
Oh, we slept every night on the boat except the first night. We stayed in a little hostel the first night. Yes?
Was the alligator really real?
Yes. Yes, he was really real. No, he was virtually real. Any other questions? Any comments?
Great photograph.
Yeah.
Wonderful photos.